Every other animal on Earth runs from fire. It is one of the deepest, most sensible instincts in all of nature. See the flames, feel the heat, and get away while you still can. And then, somewhere in Africa, more than 1 million years ago, there was one lunatic species that looked at a wall of fire tearing across the grassland, the single most dangerous thing in their entire world, and walked toward it, picked a piece of it up, carried it home, and refused to let it die. That one insane decision is the reason you exist. It's the reason you have a brain big enough to be bored by this sentence, a body that can survive a winter, and a species that eventually left the planet. Taming fire wasn't one invention among many. It was the invention, the one that quietly made every other one possible. So today, we're going to find out how our guy Og actually pulled it off. And the very first thing we have to do is throw out the version you're picturing. Because when you imagine the discovery of fire, you probably picture a clever caveman crouched over a little pile of sticks, striking two stones together, blowing gently and grinning as the first flame catches. It's a lovely image. It is also wrong by a margin of roughly 1 million years. For almost the entire story of fire, not a single human being on the planet could make it. The idea was unthinkable. Conjuring flame out of nothing, on demand, with your bare hands. That's not a campfire. That's a magic trick that took our species an unbelievably long time to learn. So if they couldn't make it, where did the first fire come from? The same place all fire came from for most of our history, the sky and the dry season. Lightning strikes, wildfires sweeping across the savanna, lava. Fire was a thing that happened to the world, violently and at random, and then burned itself out. And that changes the whole story of that first brave human, doesn't it? Og didn't create fire. Og found it. He found it the way you'd find a wounded, world-ending monster lying in the grass, and instead of running, like every sane animal around him, he reached out and adopted it. Sit with how insane that actually is. The very first fire any human ever owned was almost certainly an ember plucked from the smoking aftermath of a wildfire, a glowing coal, carried home cupped in leaves or balanced on a flat rock, treated like the most precious and most dangerous object in the world, because it was both. And here's the part we never think about. Once you've got it, you cannot let it go out, because you can't restart it. There are no matches, there's no lighter. If that ember dies, you are right back to square one, back to waiting, maybe for years, for lightning to strike somewhere close enough to steal from again. So the first great relationship with fire wasn't making it was keeping it, feeding it, babysitting it day and night forever. Somewhere in Og's group there was a person, maybe several, maybe a rotating job nobody wanted, whose entire purpose was to make sure the fire never ever died. They fed it through the night. They sheltered it from the rain. When the group moved, somebody carried a smoldering coal across miles of open country, praying it would still be alive at the other end. Losing the fire wasn't an inconvenience. It could be a death sentence for the whole group. For a huge stretch of our history, the most important job in the world was just do not let it go out. So when did we actually pull this off? When did fire stop being a wild thing we occasionally stole and start being a thing we lived with? And this is where the clean story gets messy, the way the truth usually does. The oldest decent evidence we have comes from a place called Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, where around 1 million years ago, something was burning deep enough inside the cave that wind and lightning almost certainly didn't put it there. Burned bone, ashed plants, a whisper of controlled fire 1 million years back. Then, around 800,000 years ago, at a site in Israel called Gesher Benot Yaakov, it gets clearer. Burned tools and seeds clustered in the same spots over and over, exactly where you'd expect to find a hearth somebody kept coming back to. But here's the honest, slightly uncomfortable truth that the textbooks like to smooth over. Even with those early flickers, fire didn't really become a normal, everyday, every group kind of thing until surprisingly late. Only around 400,000 years ago do we start seeing hearths everywhere all the time, the way you'd expect if everyone had it. which raises a genuinely strange possibility. For hundreds of thousands of years in between, it looks like a lot of humans were living, even pushing up into cold, freezing parts of Europe, without fire as a regular, reliable part of life. Taming fire wasn't one clean, heroic moment. It was a million-year-long stutter of fits and starts. A group gets it, uses it, loses it, goes cold and dark for generations, and somebody, somewhere, has to find it and start the whole desperate babysitting job all over again.
And making fire, actually creating it from scratch, the thing you picture as the very beginning of the story, that comes shockingly late. The clearest smoking guns we have for humans deliberately producing a spark, striking a particular mineral against flint to throw sparks into dry tinder, show up with the Neanderthals, only around 50,000 years ago. Let that reset the timeline in your head. We were carrying fire, cooking on it, and huddling around it for hundreds of thousands of years before we cracked the trick of making it ourselves. We mastered owning fire long, long before we mastered starting it. Okay. So we adopted this dangerous monster, and we spent an eternity just keeping it alive. The obvious question is why? Why go to all that trouble? What did this thing give us that was worth a job nobody could ever clock off from? And the answer is basically everything. Start with the one that may have literally rebuilt our bodies, cooking. A Harvard primatologist named Richard Wrangham put forward an idea that's as simple as it is huge. Cooking food is like doing part of your digestion outside your body before you even take a bite. Heat breaks tough food down, kills the things that would make you sick, and turns a raw meal your gut would have to grind through for hours into soft fuel you can crack open in minutes. Raw food is expensive. It costs your body enormous energy and time just to process. Cooked food is cheap and generous. And Wrangham's argument is that all that suddenly freed up energy had somewhere to go, into the single most expensive, most ravenous organ we own, the brain. In his telling, fire didn't just warm us, fire cooked us into the big-brained, small-gutted, small-toothed creature you see in the mirror. We didn't just tame fire. Fire, in a way, finished making us. Now, in fairness, and you know honesty is the whole point here, that idea has a real problem, and it's a problem about timing. Wrangham thinks this brain-building cooking started incredibly early, around 2 million years ago, with an ancestor called Homo erectus. But the hard evidence for controlled fire, like we just saw, mostly shows up much later than that. So either we were cooking long before we left behind any ash we can find, or the brain and fire story is messier than the clean version suggests. Scientists are still genuinely arguing about it. What's not really in doubt is that once cooking did take hold, it changed us. It's just that the exact moment fire reached into our skulls and started rewiring us is still up for grabs. But cooking was only the beginning of fire's gifts. Think about the night. For our entire existence before fire, darkness was simply when you died. The sun went down and the world filled up with things that could see in the dark and were extremely interested in eating you, while you sat there blind and helpless, praying for morning. Fire ended that. A ring of flame is something almost every predator on Earth refuses to cross. For the first time, the night became survivable. Humans could finally sleep on the ground in the open instead of cowering up a tree, and that safety alone reshaped how we lived. And then there's warmth, which is just freedom in disguise. With fire, suddenly the cold places on the map, the mountains, the ice edges, the brutal northern winters, stopped being instant death sentences and started being merely terrible. Fire is a huge part of how a tropical ape born on a warm savanna eventually spread into nearly every frozen corner of the planet. We didn't grow thick fur to handle the cold. We carried our own little portable sun. But maybe the strangest gift of all is the one nobody expects. Fire gave us more day. Before flame, your life ended each evening when the light did. Fire pushed the darkness back and handed us a few extra hours that had never existed before. Hours with nothing urgent to do, sitting in a warm glow, looking at the same faces. And researchers who've studied modern people who still live this way have noticed something remarkable. The talk around a fire at night is different from the talk in daylight. The daytime is for work, for plans, for arguments about who did what. But the firelight talk, that's when the stories come out, the myths, the jokes, the gossip about people who aren't there, the dreaming out loud about the dead and the spirits and what it all might mean. Fire didn't just cook our food and guard our sleep. It gave us the one thing imagination needs most, time to sit in the dark together and make things up. In a very real sense, the campfire was the first cinema, the first church, and the first social network all in one. So let's pull the whole thing back together. We did not invent fire. We found it, a wild, lethal accident of lightning and drought, and one stubborn, half-mad creature decided not to run. We couldn't make it for the better part of 1,000,000 years, so instead we did something almost harder. We kept it. We babysat a living flame across hundreds of thousands of cold, terrifying nights, losing it and finding it and losing it again, never quite letting the species' grip on it slip for good. And in return, that flame cooked a bigger brain, bought us the night, opened up the frozen half of the planet, and gave us the long, dark evenings where stories and gods and everything we'd one day call culture were first whispered into being. And here's the thing that should genuinely stop you. It never went out. That ember some terrified ancestor of yours snatched out of a wildfire 1,000,000 years ago has, in a sense, been burning ever since. Handed down, flame to flame, fire to fire, all the way to the pilot light in your stove, the candle on a birthday cake, the engine in your car, the rocket that left the planet. Every fire you have ever seen is, in spirit, the same fire. You are still, right now, living inside that one insane decision to walk toward the thing that everything else ran away from. So here's my question for you, and be honest. Strip away the matches, the lighters, the gas, all of it. Drop you into Og's world with nothing, no tools, no spark, just your 2 hands and a pile of dry grass. Do you actually think you could make fire from scratch? Or forget making it, if I handed you a single precious ember, could you even keep it alive through one cold, wet night? Tell me down in the comments. Most of us, I suspect, would be sitting in the dark. See you in the next life.